So Joe Biden is still trying to escape the gravitational well of the "you ain't black" comment when he was having the conversation with Charlemagne the God on the Breakfast Club. Just in case you hadn't heard that, Joe Biden basically says, if you can't tell the difference between whether you want to vote for myself or Trump, you ain't black. Which, hysteria, to put it mildly. Because it is a taking for granted to some degree, but I think it's more honest. I think it is the way that the politics or the Democratic Party look at the black vote. Why wouldn't they look at the black vote that way? Hillary Clinton gave the African-American community nothing. She was offering nothing. She, was breakdancing with Mary J. Blige and had a bit of hot sauce. And we gave her 91% of the vote. Put that in perspective. African-Americans voted for Hillary Clinton to the tune of 91%. That number is astonishing. I mean, for nothing. That's what I'm trying to get across to you. Why wouldn't Joe Biden look at it that way if over the last 40 years, you've basically given over everything without asking or even putting out a demand for anything in return for it? Voting is supposed to be a transactional process, every bit as much as a union is negotiated in the standpoint of the union and the company. The company is the stronger party, the union is the weaker party. At some point, however, the union gets to the point of saying, I'm done. We are not willing to accept X or Y, and they walk. And some level of negotiation needs to take place for these guys to have somewhat of a meeting of the mind. But there's always, in any negotiation, the capacity and the capability, even the necessity at times, to walk. I'm making the point that the same thing is true in your political space. And if you ignore all notions of values, all notions of standards, you remove all accountability from the process, you entirely organize yourself into politics in a way where you just want to keep the monsters at bay, not putting somebody in for an affirmative argument, then you get these milquetoast Democrats that don't get anything accomplished and that basically continues to drag the country further and further and further to the right. Understand why, though. To the right makes all the logical sense in the world when you have a huge amount of money in your political process and the interests of that wealth is going to be to the right, especially if it allows them to get more cash and more control or more dominance. Now, what is the hedge on that? What's the thing that bars that door? Because if you remove all accountability, if you say I'm just random blue, any blue will do, then basically you've removed all notions of accountability from your political process. All notions of standards are out the window. You basically said, I don't care, blank check. And as that blank check, I'll just vote for it. Now, a lot of other people don't just vote for that, and those people stop engaging in the political space, meaning in doing blue, no matter who, you've made your political situation that much more difficult to get your person elected. Not to mention the core constituency of the Democratic Party, people of color and people under a certain wage. Well, those are the people who are disproportionately don't vote. But again, the reason they don't vote is because they've been so disenchanted from the political system, as opposed to being able to get some material gains from the support that they give or the energy they put into the political process. It's been nothing. They offer nothing. You have nowhere else to go. And you're going to vote for us because we're going to keep the monsters at bay. And for 40, 50 years, that has been the modus operandi. The catch here, though, is you're in a situation where you're in the middle of a pandemic and you actually need these people to do their fucking jobs. And because accountability was out the process, and now you have all of these milquetoast Democrats in Congress that are basically functions around the owner class every bit as much as the Republican Party, well, they're not looking for your interests because they have never been looking out for your interests for the last 40, 50 years. I hope you understand my point. You're in the middle of a pandemic. The pandemic is the thing that's new, but the fact that they are looking out entirely for the ownership class is just what they've done for the last 40 years. The only difference is it's taking place in the middle of a national emergency. Joe Biden is basically apologizing for the you ain't black comment. And he says something here that the more I think about it, the more it's slightly disturbing in the way that he's looking at politics versus the way politics should be engaged. And it kind of reinforces that point that much more, that we've done ourselves a disservice by not having values in our political space. Is there anything that makes you specific to you or objectively you from the standpoint of your politics? Or are you just entirely relative to what the Republican Party is? Meaning if the Republican Party just keeps going top speed, you just go right along with it because you're just relative? Or is there something integral and objective to who you are from a policy standpoint that has some level of integrity? That's a fucking important question, right? Do you accept everything in your political space, or are there points where you walk? There need to be points where you walk. And if you have a policy that is pulling in 88% of support from people of your party, nearly unanimous support, and the Democratic Party in Congress says, we don't support that. The president or the person who's running for president says, I don't support that. Then why should you support them? You're in the middle of a pandemic with all of these people that are out of healthcare, out of jobs, and the party that is supposed to attend to your interests, ideally, especially if you have something that popular, 70% of the population, and they tell you kick rocks. You've lost all tether to your political system at that point. Even in the middle of a national emergency where under normal circumstances, political parties will be doing everything that they could to galvanize that crisis to accomplish their political ends. Trump is doing it. Trump is doing it. Medicare for all would be that policy. But you would need lefties to do what I've been doing. How do you justify, if Donald Trump is indeed the apocalypse, not supporting a policy that has 88% support in the middle of a pandemic with 40 million people that have lost their jobs, if that means unifying the party in order to beat the man you're calling the apocalypse? And ask that all the time. Joe Biden gets caught lying in the middle of his bullshit apology. That's how you know it's a bullshit apology, right? If you're going to lie in the middle of a bullshit apology. Now, Joe Biden is a habitual liar. Going back to the 80s, we've been able to show that on more than one occasion, so I don't need to show those videos again. But I think it's extra special that he gets caught lying in the middle of an apology. But listen to this last comment when he makes about he's being a wise guy. Utterly bizarre. What he's talking about being a wise guy is just the guy actually had policy priorities that he wanted to accomplish. And I, Joe Biden, am so unfamiliar with the notion of having any level of negotiation or giving any level of concessions in order to get people to vote for me that I think he was being a wise guy. He couldn't be serious. Welcome to our early morning soapbox. My name is Jamal Thomas. This is the Progressive Soapbox. Guys, if you dig this content, please like, share, and subscribe. You can always support this content through PayPal or Patreon. This content is brought to you by you, and I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to do it. This video is so... They never ask him, or they never stop and ponder on the lies. Like, let's show the video first, and I'll show you what I mean. So Joe Biden in an interview, busted for lying, and then gives a bullshit apology.
I want to ask you about the remark you made last week on the Breakfast Club. You said, if you have a problem figuring out whether you're for me or for Trump, you ain't black.
Well,
now, you've since said that you shouldn't have been so cavalier. But during the same interview, you said the NAACP has endorsed me every time I've run, which isn't true. So my question for you is about what some supporters say they're worried about, which is that all of this could end up hurting the enthusiasm that you really need to win among black voters.
well, first of all,
Biden is going to get 91% of the black vote. It doesn't matter what Joe Biden says here. But understand what that means. Honestly, just engage that for the moment. It doesn't matter what Joe Biden is going to say here. He's going to just jerk you off. That's all this is going to take place. Now, she points out that, hey, you did lie about the NAACP thing. But he's been lying about civil rights for the last 40 years, right? So what does it matter? Throw another lie on the Barbie if you're not necessarily going to make a big deal out of the fact that Joe Biden has been lying for the past 40 years about the civil rights movement. Admitted to it, and they still don't bring it up. But the fact that Joe Biden is just going to jerk you off here after giving you the honest appraisal of what he probably thinks of African Americans, that's not bothersome to you? If he can do and say pretty much anything, and you will give him pretty much all of your support, you have no leverage in that. Not just have no leverage in that, you incentivize your own marginalization and being taken for granted. When people are like, oh God, they're taking the black vote for granted. Yes, because you vote to the tune of 90% Democrat. until you get to the point where you're able to state a demand and tie that demand to whether or not you're willing to support, be it from funds, be it organization, et cetera, nothing changes. And I suspect strongly that the reason why Joe Biden is sitting here calling the guy a wise guy is because he's just basically unfamiliar with that level of politics of people trying to negotiate for the policies that they want and being able to either use political leverage from the standpoint of the money that you can use against that candidate, or for that matter, the political leverage that you can make him lose. It's not being a wise guy. That's just called politics.
Yeah, it was a mistake, number one. And I was smiling when he asked me the question. I shouldn't have been such a wise guy with him. He was being a wise guy, and I responded kind. I shouldn't have done that. It was a mistake.
So it's his fault. He was being a wise guy, and I responded. It sounds like it's his fault. I responded to him, being a wise guy. But what was it about him that was being a wise guy, Joe Biden? That he was asking about policies, that he wanted things for his particular community? If I say, if you do an aggregation of polls and you find that Medicare for All gets the top issue, let's say the top 1 or 2 in all of the polls that you do, that you aggregate, then I could say with a certain degree of certainty, well, look, even in states that you won by like 30 points, Medicare for All still won. The African American community seems to want this particular policy because that policy seems to help tremendously in regards to things that are difficult ends in their community, especially if you're dealing with some level of poverty. Same thing with elimination of student debt. You have one policy with 88% Medicare for All, the other policy with 70-something%. If you are pushing that and you're saying, look, these things will benefit materially this community, it's not about whether you put somebody who's just black in a position. That's nice, but Medicare for All is better, and getting rid of student debt is better. I mean, Obama was black, but he also gave 95% of the wealth to the top 1%, of the income to the top 1%. So having a black face is not the end all be all, especially when, from the standpoint of a community or a country or a class, the material needs of that class is the thing that I want to get attended to, because that's the thing that makes people's lives less hectic, less vulnerable, less chaotic, less insubstantial. I guess my very basic point here is Joe Biden is kind of blaming Charlemagne for asking him a question about basically policy. There are things that I want to get accomplished for my community. The Democratic Party takes this vote for granted, and Joe Biden considers that to be a wise guy. That's not being a wise guy. That's him waking up to politics. You must understand, people vote less and less and less. And part of the reason they vote less and less and less is because they don't think the political system works in their interests. Now, the people who do engage the political system tend to be, middle class, poor, people who are making under $30,000 a year, and people who of color tend to be disproportionately a majority, even though blacks make up, 13% of the population, meaning you have a small subset taking out a large disproportionate share of the people who say, yeah, this doesn't do anything for me, so I'm not going to participate. Who does that hurt? It hurts your party. Like, accepting this weak, cowardly position of whatever you give me, any random blue will do. You can build one concentration camp less and I'll be okay with that. By taking that particular position, you incentivize that behavior. You basically made it extremely clear that anything that you put up, I would accept as long as you're not a Republican. That's enough. That's all I need. I'm saying there are actual things that you need to get accomplished, not for a political football, but because they deal with the hard edges of our political system, especially in the middle of a crisis. And if you can't push him now, where he actually needs your vote, and he is in the middle of a pandemic, then there's something wrong with your political system, and there's something wrong with him to think that that is being a wise guy, as opposed to just pushing him, saying, this is what we want. This is our demand. Accept it or not. But the catch is, if you're going to put a demand, you have to have a condition for that demand, meaning some level of leverage, even if that leverage is just to make sure he can lose. That is politics. That's the level of politics where we need to go. And I hate to point this out again, but that is the politics that the Democratic Party was willing to use in trying to take out Sanders. Keep in mind, they were perfectly willing to go to a brokered convention if that meant ripping the nomination away from Sanders. And all of them, each and every one of them, knew that that meant they were going to lose to Trump. No Sanders voter was going to vote for him if you rip it out of Sanders' hands. The jig was up. They basically showed the house of cards for what it was. That, yeah, we want you to back us. But at the same time, if it becomes a candidate who you have that is viable, that could literally win, all bets are off. All bets are off. The left, or what I consider to be the left, the people who are advocating for those particular policies, need to function in the same way. And in functioning in the same way, stand in solidarity with those policies. You accept them or you don't. And it's one of those things where you negotiate for what you're going to get, because there's no expectation that Joe Biden is Bernie Sanders. I mean, I think the issue is go do your job. And your job is basically, supposedly, to represent the people of this country. And in doing so, a majority say we want Medicare for all. A majority say we want the elimination of student debt. A majority say we want the expansion of Social Security. A majority wants to raise taxes on the rich, not drop them in the way that Biden is going to do, dropping the corporate tax rate. I guess I'm saying, well, he's going to drop it from Obama's era, but over the course of a cycle, he's dropping it. I guess the point I'm trying to make here is some of this stuff goes beyond just a political ad campaign. And it goes to actual real needs that people have. And those needs, in many respects, are not being met. And people are persistently vulnerable in this country. Those diseases of despair, those, crack habits or crack addictions, these people flipping out about wearing masks and whatnot, or just people not having their needs met because the political system didn't want to supply for those needs because they wanted to keep those people vulnerable so they could be forced back to work. Even in cases of meat packing places where they start off the beginning of the month with 1,600 cases, you end up with 7,000 at the end. We can do better than this. We can do better than this. Let's see the rest.
I have never taken the
here's the jerk off
for granted. Never once. And I've had overwhelming support in my state and overwhelming support from the African American community in my whole career. But I have never taken it for granted. I work like the devil for it, and I have to earn it every single time. Nobody's vote should be taken.
I have no idea what that means. I have no idea what that means. None. I mean, and I would point this out to anybody who thinks, oh, well, yeah, Joe Biden is saying something there. He's not saying anything. Those are empty words. It's fluff. There's no content in anything that he just said there. Those are just statements of assertion. No, I never take the African American vote for granted. No, I never do that. Nope. I never do it. Here's my hot sauce. I'll end this here. Like, share, and subscribe. Let me make sure this flipped over correctly. And come on. There we are. All right, guys. Have a good one.